welcome everyone to today's NTC Now session. I'm Paige, I'm the head of community at the Nature Tech Collective. I'm here with my colleague Zara, who helps me set these up. And the Nature Tech Collective is an unbiased, pre-competitive space for the nascent nature tech industry. We're trying to be a space where conversations can happen to break down the silos and allow us all to work faster together. And the typical audience in these types of webinars is anyone from project developers to nature tech providers to also kind of more the demand side like corporates and investors. And so please, if you're here, do kind of rename yourself to your name and your organization, just so it can be also an effective networking space. But we're all here because I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. We're all here because we're really interested in how to go towards nature positive. And so these conversations also are a way to kind of show the people in the projects that are doing really amazing experiments and action in that direction. Today, we're looking at a crucial challenge, how big, inspiring goals like transforming a campus to nature positive can actually be put into action and measured on the ground. This is really crucial for projects everywhere because achieving true nature positive results really demands detailed location-specific planning and modeling. So I'm really excited to dig into that. That's why today I'm really thrilled to invite Kevin Halsey, who's the co-founder of Ecometrix and their platform Ecosystem Intelligence, and their partner Lee Ball from Catawba College, which is a North Carolina university that's working hard to transform their campus. So there we are. Without further ado, Lee and Kevin, welcome. Really glad to have you here. Could I ask you both to just introduce yourselves and your organizations really briefly, maybe starting with Kevin?
Yeah, thank you, Paige. So Kevin Halsey from Ecometrix Solutions Group. We are based in Northwest Montana, and our focus is on measuring ecosystem performance and ecosystem service production.
Hi, good morning. My name is Lee Ball. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability at Catawba College. We're located in the Piedmont region of North Carolina in the U.S. And yeah, I'm just happy to be here. Thanks, Paige.
Thanks, Lee. And actually, let's start with you. You're obviously kind of the instigator of this whole thing. What first inspired Catawba College to decide to make its whole campus nature positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started with an idea that I had that was honestly an inspiration with from Interface Flooring's factory as a forest. We were just talking about their film Beyond Zero that that gets into that a little bit, and when I heard about that, and then met Kevin not long after that, and had the opportunity to work with him and some others, and understand that we could actually model performance like we do buildings. That really intrigued me. Was doing a lot of work in the kind of operations side of sustainability, but I'm also an educator, a long time working in higher ed. And I've always thought that a college campus is really the perfect place to have a proving ground for doing regenerative work. And so now that we're firmly in this regenerative space, we feel like we needed a place where people could come and see this stuff and talk to others that are involved, because there are a lot of great projects around the world that are not real accessible, and we wanted to be extremely accessible, and we wanted to blur the lines too between the operations side and the academic side, where we create a real effective living laboratory. It's kind of a cliche term in higher ed, but we're really trying to do it well in really meaningful ways that is supporting the student success and recruitment, and in all of our partners that we're working with. We want them to be able to come to this place and bring their clients and talk to us and learn about how we convinced our board members and our leadership to do this. But our school had a long history of supporting environmental initiatives. they installed maybe what was one of the first geothermal systems, like district energy systems in the country in the late 1990s. That really set the stage for the environmental sustainability journey at the college, and then their academic programs as well. And so it wasn't just me arriving and doing all this stuff. I've been there almost 2 years. There was a lot of cultivation that happened prior to my arrival, and then when I got to the college, I kind of pitched this idea to the president and the board, and they were like, "Yeah, let's see what we can do."
That's amazing. And from what I understand, both you and Kevin met at the Biomimicry Summit. So you had been also potentially kind of talking back and forth about biomimicry and nature positive and the tools that enable that long also before the project kicked off. Nice.
Yeah, that's right. I think about 7 years ago, give or take a year, or we met, and I was just incredibly intrigued by their body of work, and we're kind of shooting in the dark with modeling performance with some of our ideas that we wanted to implement in our spaces, both indoors and outdoors, but particularly outdoors.
Mhm.
And then and we'll get into this, but having a reference that is our guide just made so much sense, and so that's what we're doing.
Right. Okay, so let's
Yeah,
start at the beginning. Oh, sorry, Kevin.
no, I was just going to add that that common background that we shared was really fantastic for uh, once Lee got ready to launch the initiative, he already knew what we did, how we do it. That
Hmm.
was just kind of built into it. But he also knows where we want to go, right? There
Right.
have been a lot of conversations at those biomimicry summits about where do we need to get? What are the things we need to evolve into these the different metrics and platforms that we use for measuring nature? How do we need to be thinking about things? And so this really became an opportunity not just to showcase what it does, but help it get to where it needs to be,
Hmm.
right? We could really build some of that evolution into the project, and that was fantastic.
That makes a lot of sense to me because biomimicry, whilst, a really interesting and sexy term in a way, it's still quite abstract. And so
Mm.
really helpful to have partners that understand that vision and whom you can talk about it with on the long term. Uh, but okay, so if we start at the very beginning of the project and the campus, uh, I don't know if that's a question for Lee or Kevin, but what's the environment at Catawba College, and what were the main ecological problems that you found when you first analyzed the campus? Or maybe not problems, challenges that you wanted to address,
I can
however we
kick it
want to
off
word it.
and then let Kevin continue. I think that we have a really passionate and informed student population. So they're at most schools and families sometimes and organizations. There's always someone that wants us to do better, wants us to do more. And when I arrived, I asked our leadership, do you want us to be innovators? Do you want us to be early adopters? And the answer was that we wanted to be innovators. And so I was able to share this knowledge with our team, because I do feel like it is quite innovative. And but our challenges are like many. We have crippling deferred maintenance. We have like a lot of schools around the world, and especially in the U.S., there are challenges with enrollment and retention.
Mhm.
And so, in an effort to really solve for pattern and identify, all the mutual benefits to get many people excited about this, we talk to student affairs and enrollment management about how these projects could really help support student life and how it could support faculty and staff life, and all kinds of different ways. In addition, so that cultural piece we feel like was just as important as the biodiversity improvements that we're wanting to identify. But I think it was no shock to us. But water is the big opportunity to improve water quantity, water quality.
Yeah. And it looks like from the photos that Kevin is showing there, like quite a big campus. What's the size of it?
Oh,
Oh, okay. It's
it's
big.
like 40 some acres, but we have the main campus, but we have 100 and almost 200-acre biological preserve
Beautiful.
that is, that is adjacent, that's contiguous to campus. And that, in 120 some odd acres of that, we identified it as our reference.
Nice.
And Kevin, you
Yeah,
can expand
the
on that.
photo on the lower right is that forest preserve that he's
Mhm.
talking about. And you can see the campus up at the top of the photo up in there.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful. And so beyond maybe improving biodiversity, like everyone might think, what were the big practical issues that this nature positive campus design needed to solve or needs to solve still?
Well, we have a lot of runoff. We have a lot of impervious spaces. And then you look at the picture on the left here, we have these big, we call them our sacred lawns.
Mm.
A lot of places around the world have these spaces that a lot of people have a lot of emotion and feelings about. So this particular lawn you're looking at here, we likely will never build a building there.
Hmm.
And I think that we're slowly getting some traction on what we could do besides just lawn like this. But it could be more formal native gardens is an idea that we've been throwing out. But one thing that we've done with some of these sacred spaces that we know we won't build buildings, that we've put geothermal wells underneath them. And so in our efforts to decarbonize, we're doing massive switching from natural gas to electric. And so a lot of these spaces that we know we will not build on, we have wells. And one really large one is a floodway next to a creek that we're not allowed to build on.
Hmm.
And that's where about 250 wells are being installed as we speak.
Beautiful.
But
Okay.
runoff, kind of monoculture grass runoff is a big challenge. Parking lots, roads,
Yeah.
sidewalk, rooftops, etc.
Yeah. The sacred lawns, sacred spaces that Lee talks about, to me, that's really one of the big opportunities here, because if we're going to go nature positive, we're going to move it towards having some of that natural functional performance that you would normally see in this biome, in this location. There's a huge amount of area that is these mowed lawns with a few large trees, right?
Hmm.
And so how can we start to integrate solutions that will increase functionality somewhat, maintain the basic purpose they currently serve? And a lot of that is, you'll see students hanging out there studying on a sunny afternoon, right? And you don't want to completely eliminate that, but can we change the way we do maintenance? Can we leave down wood in places? Can we start to integrate more native vegetation into it in different places?
Hmm.
Find ways to actually start to get some functionality happening in these massive blank palettes that are out there, right? Which currently, that lawn will do really good for water quality, right? Because it's got a high basal density, so you'll get good filtration from water coming through. But it's not doing much to support biodiversity. It's not doing much for carbon storage. As a matter of fact, if you're mowing it all the time and taking those long clippings out, you're not doing much for the soil. You're not doing much for carbon. You're really you have very limited functionality. So what are the things we can do to start to get some of that functionality back?
Hmm.
And when you start thinking about globally, the opportunities for spaces like that, how much of our urban areas where we've set them aside for open space or nature are no more than mowed lawns like this, right? And so how can we start to create solutions that will be repeatable, and
Hmm.
something that can be applied throughout our urban spaces to start to gain some of that functionality. And what Lee said earlier, we have so many clients where you sign an NDA at the front, and any innovations you come up with, you can't talk about, right? Unless at some point down the road, the company needs to talk about them. This is something where if we are creating solutions, if there are things that work, if there are things we want to highlight, Lee wants to get it out there in the world. He wants it to be talked about. And so this really is an opportunity to start thinking about how can we create solutions for this type of situation that would be repeatable and replicable around the world.
How exciting. And
Yeah.
especially the concept of a nature positive lawn. That's a big issue in
Right.
this.
Yeah, some of the things we're already doing just with this lawn in particular. I mean, we're transitioning to electric, mowers, trimmers, blowers, etc. We're experimenting, trying to reduce different chemicals applications in different places. But there's a risk. There's a risk with a lawn going brown, and then having a kind of a negative feedback loop on the work. So, what we do is try to we're trying to experiment in some out of the way areas to make sure that our process is, we feel confident before we bring it to a space like this. And then we're working on closing the loop on our campus composting so that we can eventually have soil amendments that are applied to these lawns as well.
Amazing. And so to get into the process you're currently undertaking for exploring the challenges and what you're going to be doing on top of everything that you're already talking about, probably a question for Kevin, Ecometrix, ecosystem intelligence. Obviously, you have to map the campus. How do you analyze the land, and what's your process for turning this kind of ground level data about things like vegetation and soil into a measurement of how well the ecosystem is actually working?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me jump to this slide. So I'm sure most of you are not familiar with the platform. So as I said, what we're focused on trying to do is measure ecosystem performance and ecosystem service production. And the way we do that is very bottom up. We focus on the attributes on the landscape. So vegetative structures, soil composition, water regime, topography, all of those attributes on the landscape that determine whether or not ecological functions are performed. So, think in terms of infiltration as an example. What are the soil types, soil structures? What's the organic content in the soil? What are the roots structures that are creating pathways for that water? All of those different things that contribute to helping infiltration occur, we're trying to measure. Those are the attributes that are the data that go into the system. So all of the vegetation, soil, water regime, topography, all of the aspects of that are contributing to the functions we're trying to measure. That's the data we collect. Once we've collected that data, it all gets distributed to the appropriate models that tell us about the ecological functions. And then we look at how those ecological functions come together to produce the outcomes that we label ecosystem services, right? So if we think about water quantity control, for example, that's a variety of different ecological processes coming together. So you've got, think of the life history of a raindrop. You have interception happening. That's taking some of the water out of the storm system, right? So taking it out of the runoff. Eventually you'll get through fall, you'll get canopy, leaf structure will be saturated, and it starts making its way to the ground. Or you don't have any vegetation and it just goes straight to the ground, and it may infiltrate. Eventually your soils will become saturated. So you'll start to get runoff, but you may have depressional areas, ponds, puddles, depressions of different types, storing some of that water short term. Eventually it makes its way to a drainage, and you have conveyance capacity that you now need to think about. That's 4 ecological functions just right off the bat that are determining stormwater management, right? What we call water quantity control. So when we think about those outcomes that we're looking for, they're provided by the fact that we have intact ecological processes on the landscape. Once we've measured the production of the ecosystem service, then we can think about what happens to it, because we know a benefit that's produced in one spot doesn't just stay in that spot. It has an area of impact, an area in which that benefit is experienced.
Right.
And we call those service sheds. And so the next thing is really mapping what is the dissipation of that benefit over time and or distance. And then that helps us understand where is that benefit experienced. And then you can start to understand the value it's providing to the people for whom that benefit is reaching. Now, our system does not measure value. That is a different type of measurement, and there are economists that can do it much better than we do. What we try to make sure of is that all of our outputs will contribute to doing those valuation studies. And we can plug them directly into like a prioritization framework, and that is a type of value. But for monetary value, we leave that to the economists.
And for us in higher ed, we articulate the value. We can quantify some of the value, but it's equally important to just be able to explain what the benefits are. And I'll share one for me as a longtime environmental sustainability educator. We want our campus to have a real balance of being beautiful, accessible, but also improving its natural performance. But we have students and maybe others that are afraid of nature.
Mm.
And so as someone is trying to get people to care about nature more and create a connection to nature, it's not as easy as just say, hey, just go walk in the woods. People are like, I'm afraid of the woods. I mean, they're afraid of people, they're afraid of insects, they're afraid of snakes, all the things. And it's a surprising amount of feedback we've had from students, especially about natural spaces that we have around campus. So, yeah, we don't go there. And so what we want to do is weave it together in a way that if they feel safe, it's accessible, and then they can, experience all the myriad benefits of being immersed in nature. And then hopefully they'll may want to expand and explore. And then when when they become a leader after they graduate with a college degree, which every one of them probably will, hopefully they'll make a better, maybe some more informed decisions when they get into the workplace.
Incredible. And that's something that we talked about kind of addressing today, is that this campus project is becoming kind of part of the college curriculum in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's being turned into a living classroom and a teaching tool for students and faculty. Nice.
Yeah. I want to just real quick, Lee was talking about water quality, or water quantity is the big issue. One of the outputs of the system is it's all spatially enabled. So when we collect the data, and this actually finishes answering your question, Paige, which I forgot to get to, is when we actually do this process, when we apply the tool, we divide the site into areas of relative homogeneity for attribute distribution. So a lot of times that's driven by vegetation, the vegetation structures. But when you think about something like water quantity control, slope can play a big part of that. So slope may be an attribute that we think about for creating a break in how we create a different survey unit. And you can see the different survey units that have been created here. And what this is a heat map of performance. So this is telling us how well is water quantity control being provided here. And you can see the site has a lot of clay.
Mm-hmm.
Where there are soils. It's got pavement. It's got compacted lawn spaces. It has a lot of things that you don't want to have if you're trying to manage stormwater. So all of this area, there's a kind of a ridge that runs here, and everything that side of it flows down. This is the practice fields for the campus for all their sports activities, and these frequently flood.
Mm-hmm.
Everything on this side flows this way and then flows up into the same creek, which runs along here. And managing that stormwater is difficult, with the type of campus setting that they have here and the soils that they've got.
And so,
Yeah, go ahead.
no, you keep going. If
So yeah, that's so the heat mapping is one of the types of outputs, and you can see a different heat map here. This is for air quality, which also has some issues because there is a main road for the city that comes right through here,
mm-hmm.
and the campus is built on either side of it. So you do have a pollutant source right there, that you can see not a lot of air quality support happening there. So that's something that would be nice to work on. The water quantity, air quality, temperature regulation are some of the things that are really key. Just to provide a little bit of explanation, the system output is a functional acre or hectare, or service acre or hectare, depending on which level of the modeling we're looking at. And basically what that is providing is a measure of both quality and quantity. So if we have a 10-acre site and it's performing at 80% of maximum potential, then what you have is 8 functional acres, right? So that becomes an output that really describes the amount of benefit being provided from nature in that location. Lee was talking about having a reference.
Mm-hmm.
With this type of unit of measure, you kind of have to have a reference, because 80%, well, is that good? Is that bad? You need to understand how nature thinks that particular function should be performed in that particular location.
Yes.
What does it think is ideal? 80% is really good. We never see anything performing that's natural, or at least rarely, if ever, do we ever see anything performing at 100%.
Okay.
Because that's not how nature works. Nature is a distributed system that's doing lots and lots of things. It's never optimized towards just one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's doing all sorts of different functional processes. And to do that, you may have an attribute that contributes positively to one function, negatively to another, right? And so as you think about the attribute distribution on the landscape, what is ideal is typically not going to be 100%. So understanding what is good and bad depends on understanding, well, what does nature think is appropriate? So 80%, that's very good usually, right? And in this instance, you can, it's undisturbed, nice vegetation. You can see if you build a road through it, none of this is to scale, by the way. That would be a huge road if that was 10 acres. But basically, you can see you now start to reduce performance. So 45% now, you've gone from 8 functional acres to 4.5 functional acres. So you can start to see how diminished something is from where it should be.
Makes sense.
And then we can basically put that into a stacked bar chart where we can look at a number of categories. There are 52 different metrics in the system, but we try to organize them so that you can go at the very highest level to an ecosystem integrity score down to these categories that are typically looked at in sustainability. You can think about how those categories are performing, or you can dig down into very specific things like, how well are you providing nesting or forage opportunities for invertebrates, for example. So you can get incredibly detailed and specific, and then we just look at different ways of aggregating that data to help understand at different levels what's happening. And this is just a very basic. You can see this campus actually performs pretty well. This is the biome reference, and that biome reference, so a biome is a large area. Typically, we try to find a local site that can help inform that reference a little more clearly. And in this case, we use the nature reserve that on campus. But you can see this is what how nature thinks these different things should be performed. And that's going to be different as you go from place to place. And you can really see that if you go to a desert xeric shrubland biome versus a temperate broadleaf biome like this is, you're going to perform very differently. And what this helps you do is stay within the parameters that nature thinks is sustainable, that will have resilience in your location. Because if you tried to create that temperate broadleaf outcome in a desert xeric shrubland biome, you're going to have a lot of additional water inputs, energy inputs to make that happen, right? So you start to lose resilience, you start to lose sustainability. So this really becomes our guidepost.
So interesting.
And you can see this is our version of ecosystem integrity is basically focused on how well are we staying within what nature says are our guidelines. So as we look at these different categories of performance for soil health, air quality, biodiversity, climate, water quality, water quantity, human health and well-being, what does nature say is the appropriate target? What does nature say is that level of performance that is the ideal for an intact, well-functioning habitat? Now, this also is based on a mosaic of habitats within a biome where we can zero in on a specific habitat type. If that's, if the area that we're comparing it against is a specific habitat type, we can narrow it down to that specific habitat type. So it's like for like. You can see this is the forest preserve and how it performs. And you can see it's right at reference.
So we're getting towards the end of the kind of the allotted time for the fireside chat, so people can kind of ask questions. I'll let you kind of walk through this really quickly, because I really want to see it, and it's so interesting, kind of these points. But then I'll ask you about what you're trying to achieve as well.
You can see the campus baseline is here, but when you look at the entirety of what's there, the campus with the preserve, it's really performing well. And so that gives you an idea of how much adding some actual nature that's performing the way it's supposed to can really start to bring you up very quickly from what your baseline is. And this is where it gets difficult, right? When you're in those urban environments, what do you do with it? How do you find ways to make performance a little bit better here? And I want to call out HOK is doing the master planning for this project, and Sean Quinn in particular, if any of you have ever met him, is a genius and can do amazing things with integrating biomimicry and using our outputs to figure out how far can he get, how close can he move things towards that natural level of performance. And we're really excited to see what he comes up with. So what we have here is primarily just baseline compared to reference. As that master plan starts to come in, we'll start to see the design, and we can run that through the platform and understand how design moves us from that baseline closer to that natural level of performance. And this gives HOK the opportunity to test different scenarios to see what's really moving us in the right direction for those things that are priorities in this location, right? Because there are some things, it's a balance. It's a working landscape. It's an urban area. It's a campus. It has students. They're trying to have classes. There are lots of people moving from one place to another and looking for places to study. All of that functionality of a campus has to be accommodated as we start to try to integrate better natural performance. So what can we do? How can we strike that balance in the best way? This gives them an opportunity to really run different scenarios and see, okay, what moves us in the right direction? What gets us to where we want to be? You can see here, this is just a very preliminary, some of the, one of the sites that we have where they've done some advanced work where they were already moving on this. You can see the baseline. Moving in urban space like this that far is actually impressive. We've seen some of HOK's designs, where they actually get up in here. They're, just really bumping up against reference. And we expect some of these areas they'll be doing that. But you can see this gives you an idea of, okay, what's happening now? How can we start to move the needle on this to really move it towards what nature thinks is the right level of performance? And when you think about doing that in our urban spaces, and you think about what that means for livability, that's huge. And the ability to start thinking about bringing social equity to areas where you have a lack of nature, and you can start to really map that out, because this can be applied at any scale. We can apply it to a city and see where are your nature deserts, so to speak, where you really don't have nature present, and so you have underperformance. And typically those are the areas where you have low-income communities, minority communities. And so you can start to really zero in on where do we need to do something different with our open space? Where do we need to start making open space? Where do we need to start integrating nature, planting trees, right? You go to a wealthy suburb, there are street trees everywhere. There are trees in everyone's yards. There's vegetation everywhere you look. That needs to be what all urban areas look like eventually. And as we do that, that doesn't just help those low-income communities. It certainly helps them, but it helps all of us as we start to move those urban areas closer to that biome reference. We start to increase that functional performance, because we have so much urban space. It has to be performing, right? We need to be. We can't just give it up and say no, it's urban. We're not going to have any performance there.
I agree. Yeah.
We need to eke out any performance we can get from every square foot of the globe at this point.
Yeah, Kevin, if you back up a couple of slides just to give a little context with that one right there, he mentioned HOK. We're working with them on a regenerative landscape master plan for the entire campus. This project was already underway. This is a residence hall we're building on a parking lot that's it's gonna be a passive house residence hall. 130 beds, super low EUI, but the landscape we committed to regenerative design. So you'll be glad to hear, Kevin, that we're already working with the landscape design group on this with HOK to really improve the performance of what they've been speccing and
Nice.
try to bring some extra resources. But we have about $100 million of capital projects happening simultaneously. So we're taking an ecosystems approach to design rather than kind of your antiquated, I think in my opinion, systems thinking approach to all of the work that we're doing on campus to really try to think about this in a really holistic manner.
That's really beautiful, and we'll have to have a follow-up webinar to kind of show some of the interventions and how they're actually performing it. Fantastic. Okay, is there anything else that you really wanted to go through, Kevin and Lee?
We talked a little bit about service sheds, just to
Yes.
provide an idea of what that ends up looking like.
Right.
We talked about the beauty of doing this work with Catawba, who wants to get the information out, and the difficulty of working with corporate clients. This is the one slide I have from a corporate client that I can share.
Okay.
This was a data center design in North Holland, and the reason I can share it is they've already published it, so it's fair game now. Basically, this is looking at a pollinator service shed. So looking at if, and the issue here was a data center, a lot of pushback from the community, which is starting to happen increasingly, in which I
Of
can
course.
only say, in spite of the fact that we work with data center developers as clients sometimes, that's a good thing because it's making them rethink how they do data centers. And that's going to be such a huge footprint on our landscape over time. Having them rethinking how they deliver data centers is absolutely critical. In this instance, they were getting pushback because this is an agricultural community. It's all tulip farms. And here's a big, ugly structure. And they were giving no thought to what does that mean to the community in which they were building this thing. And so they were getting a lot of pushback. Every day of delay for a data center is $300,000 lost costs. And that adds up. You can do a lot of nature establishment, a lot of restoration work for $300,000. So one day's delay, give up some space, plant some vegetation, do some restoration. It'll work out because in this instance, it had been 3 months of delays. They changed their approach, started thinking about, well, how can we help the community? And they got their permits within a week. In this instance, this is one of the things they thought about was, well, they do have problems with pollination here because they don't have a diversity of vegetation. They have tulips. Well, you need vegetation that's blooming over a long period of time. If you're going to support pollinators, they can't just have food for 1 week, right? Or a few weeks. They need it throughout the year. So how can you start to create some pollination support? This shows where if on this data center site, if they planted pollinator gardens, which they ended up doing, where would that benefit be experienced? And this is really just based on the travel distance of the pollinators that we were looking at. Most of the benefit would be within a 2-kilometer area, but you would get some benefit clear out to 15 kilometers potentially. So you can see that diminishing level of benefit. But now you can also think about, well, okay, so I did some work on site. What if I start finding places to do some off-site mitigation and do some pollination planting over in here or over in here and start to really create these overlapping circles that start to really reestablish that benefit and provide the community the benefits that they need.
Fascinating. And I never heard about the word service shed before you started mentioning it. So quite like that concept. Okay, well, we are way over time in terms of the webinar. Thank you so much. That was fascinating.
Sorry.
No. I let it go. Well, for the audience, we're now going to unmute you, and it's the moment that you can come up and ask some questions. If you don't have any questions, I have a ton. But yeah, thank you so much, Kevin and Lee.
Thank you, Paige.
Does anyone here have any questions? Gunther.
Hey all, that was really cool to hear, and it was just neat to see that particular case study of the campus there. So thanks to both of you for that. One of the things, and going back to this, in a non-technical question, was you made this comment just about people being scared of nature, right? And certainly one of the things that's big is, we all have to contend with is that when we're trying to build these programs and stuff to get people to move, right? We live in a vibes versus like data driven world, to boil that down really a lot in a certain way right now. But so that just struck me when you said that. And so I'd be curious to hear about a little bit more. And if that's part of like the programs that you guys are working on, aside from this other stuff where like the data is amazing, right? And it really shows something, but how do you switch that to being like, actually lots of bugs are cool,
Yeah.
right? Which doesn't
Yeah.
really work for a lot of people. So yeah, just any thoughts on that? It would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, it's funny. We're giving tour. We have a lot of pollinator gardens that we've already installed on campus, and we give tours, and it surprised us how many people are immediately concerned about getting stung by a bee. We installed pollinator gardens next to an outdoor basketball court. We had students that were worried about getting stung by bees. Part of our regenerative landscape master plan with HOK is it's like a 20-week process working with them, and they're based all over the U.S. and outside the U.S. even, and so they've been to campus twice already, and it's been a real, kind of a classic master planning, like super iterative, super integrated with faculty, staff, community, our board members, our leadership team, just really trying to get everyone's input and buy-in and get people excited. And so a lot of that has led to just thinking about the programming in these spaces. So like we program buildings like per square foot. We started thinking about, look, we should be programming those outdoor spaces like kind of by square foot by square meter or whatever in real similar ways, and making them flexible, and but just having just a dry flat place to sit or a covered place to sit that has no glare, or maybe there are seats or benches or something. It has really just emerged as a desire from the community. And we're not too worried about the fear factor too much. I think that it's just being outside. I mean, we have squirrels on campus and red-tailed hawks hunting the squirrels on campus, and we have a lot of nature on campus, and we're aggressively trying to remove invasive species as part of our strategy. So it's not like we're devoid of nature. So we're just kind of replacing nature. But we will continue to help people understand everyone's role in this, as living beings. And but yeah, everyone is surprised by that feedback. I mean, not everyone. A lot of people have been really intrigued and wants to hear more about it. And it's something that I've learned over the years to really take, student and just our community's concerns real seriously. They're all valid, and so we want to, help them understand that, it's not as scary as it seems.
Lee said something about that once that struck me, that we have trepidation or hesitation or fear of things we don't understand. But if you can instead instill curiosity, teach them a little, make them curious about what they're seeing, you start to replace that trepidation and fear with that curiosity and that desire to experience more, right? And that I think is really valuable. But your comment in general, Gunther, is so spot on in terms of what we're seeing. Things like we can't put water features in our designs because they'll attract mosquitoes, right? Is the immediate assumption. The truth is, a good water feature that has, good quality water is doing, providing water quality benefits, is not going to support mosquitoes. And we actually had to develop a specific mosquito model that we could run to show people that this water feature is not supporting mosquitoes. Right now, if you put a bunch of old tires in your design, that will definitely support mosquitoes, right? But it's just educating people on how nature works, and some things, yes, we should be worried about. All right. I mean, and in urban design, we don't want to be bringing a lot of large mammals, apex predators into an urban area. Okay, so we may not include attributes within our design that are going to be an attraction for, grizzly bears. There aren't any in Catawba anyway, but nonetheless, right? I mean, it's what can we do? What can be supported? Songbirds, certainly, those aren't doing any damage, and invertebrates, those are doing lots of beneficial things, right? I mean, it says what biodiversity can you support, and instilling that sense of curiosity and how is that biodiversity benefiting you? What is it doing? That starts to break down that fear, I think.
We do have coyotes and the occasional transient black bear.
Yeah.
Something to watch out for. Hyunju, for the next question.
And it's a fascinating work, especially how the result is clearly communicated with the. I really like the concept of the service shed and all that. I'm actually one because I do TNFD analysis for companies quite a lot, and one of my challenges is how to communicate all these nature-related indicators with this non-scientific people. So I guess, Kevin, you might have some, I mean, to come up with this wonderful concept, you might have had the journey to try different indicators, and maybe some of them was feeding well, some of them having some difficulties, and then maybe like, can you explain me like their reactions on those numbers, and also if you have any challenges at the moment in terms of maybe different stakeholders have different understanding of different set of indicators. I mean, sharing that experience would be very much helpful. But maybe also from the lead side, like as a, I guess the customer as the university side, if you find some of the indicators very useful for you, some of them still quite difficult to understand, maybe that experience could also be useful, insightful for me. Thanks.
Yeah,
A quick reaction to this. It is mostly our school. We consider ourselves an anchor institution in our community that we've committed to being generous and positive within our community because we have the resources to do that. So when we're keeping water on campus from flowing into our adjacent creek or storm sewers too quickly, then we're reducing flood risk downstream as a as a anchor institution. So we recognize that we have physical borders, but ecology doesn't really have borders, and so we're being a responsible landowner by trying to reduce flood risk downstream the best we can, and then provide a model in our community so that regenerative work can hopefully influence others within our community to try to do similar things if it makes sense to them.
Yeah, and I love that question. I think the TNFD application is one that we've spent some time focusing on, and certainly from a impact and risk, understanding risk is part of that is understanding how are you changing everything within the system, and not just the footprint that you changed, but the ramifications of the changes to that footprint. How is that experienced within the broader landscape? That starts to highlight some of those potential risk areas that you experience and see. So I love the direction of the question, and I think that's it's good. It's a good question, and for us, most of the time it comes down to water or air. Those are the two big areas. Unfortunately, not often enough concern about biodiversity, although that's certainly on the rise. So, Paige,
Yes. Zoom has told me. Alberto, you're in these last 4 minutes, please.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Lee and Kevin. Very, very inspiring project and presentation, really resonates with me. My question is more in the technical side. I mean, you're aggregating a lot of parameters, a lot of metrics, I guess, measurements as well, which I would imagine is really challenging. What's the most difficult part of that, or what um, it's collecting? I imagine this is a big effort, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, where to start with that question, Alberto? That's a great question. So, and this gets at something that I think is worth highlighting. The data input is always a really difficult part of all of these things, and people choose different strategies. They either, and everything is a compromise between ease of use for the person using the metric or the platform, and rigorous outputs, right, that have good resolution, low levels of uncertainty. And everybody uses different, as you guys all know, some people use remote data. Some people use collected data, but it's, visual data collection. Some people go out and you have to set up quadrats, and you'll spend months doing data collection, and it's ultimately ultimately everything is a compromise between those two things. How hard is it to use, but how good is the data you're getting as an output? And one of the things we're excited about is the opportunities that AI, for all the damage it's likely to do and all the things we have to be wary of, it also provides an opportunity to change how we think about data collection, right? Especially when you start bringing machine learning and different AI applications into, think about being able to do visual observation of a canopy and have that canopy cover average provided for you. Okay, well, that suddenly very significantly changes how hard it is to do data collection, but it also changes how much resolution we have in the system. Because currently, if we send 3 people out, we need to make sure that they all come back with the same answer. That means all of the data has to be collected in ranges, and those ranges have to be set at a level that will ensure repeatability. Okay, so you change the way data collection happens, start integrating some of these technologies, and those ranges, those bins that we collect our data in, can get smaller and smaller. And pretty quick, it's not the data accuracy that becomes the limiting factor, it's our understanding of the ecosystem, right? We have uncertainty spread throughout all of these modeling processes, and right now, data is the big thing where you create uncertainty. Change that, and you start to improve resolution. So that's one of the things that we're really focused on. But for the rest of it, we have 800,000 interrelationships, ecological relationships that we're capturing within the various models that we have, and we use BaseNets to do that. That's something that's not difficult so much as it just takes time. We've been building this over 20 years. And so creating that takes time. But again, you start applying some of these new technologies that are becoming available, we can create models much quicker if we can test them really quickly and integrate AI to help with that testing process. So yeah, there are a lot of struggles, a lot of things we're working with. The data collection right now is really the big focus.
Alberto,
Very
I'll give you
impressive.
just
Thanks.
one anecdotal example of when the team was on campus. We've been doing some training with our faculty and some of our students to learn how to use the tool. Our faculty are really excited about trying to teach ecology with it. And but we had a pollinator garden on campus, and we modeled it, and it was not performing quite like some of us imagined. And then we realized, well, what can we do to improve it? And just one simple thing, by putting like more downed wood, logs and sticks, in the pollinator garden. So, we have down wood that comes off of trees onto our lawns, and our facilities group just they just go away, right? Just go away. We don't want to see that. And so now we're rethinking, okay, well, what can we do with that down wood? I don't want it to ever go away. It needs to go somewhere, to stay on the property, even if we drag it into the woods, And but we put it in the pollinator garden and remodeled it, and it gave it a little bump in performance. I mean, it wasn't drastic, but this is a death by 1,000 cuts or whatever. This is life through a million interventions. And that's really our approach here on campus.
Amazing, thank you.
Excellent quotable moment, Lee. Thank you so much, both of you, again for a great presentation. Really great to get into like the minute detail of what you've done. A lot of people have jumped off because it was time, and I'm sure everyone wants to just kind of thank you again.
Thank you all for showing up and for the great questions. And Paige, thank you for the invite.
Have a lovely day, evening, afternoon, everything, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.